Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the Jews was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Cross the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
All right, we should be up and rolling here. Give me a thumbs up. Got sound now? Can you hear me now? Good to go, McGill says. All right, folks. One-man show. If I could fire the producer, I would, but then I wouldn't have a job. All right. So that was my spiel for what Oversight Live is and what we are all about. If you've got questions, chat them in your window. Like if you can't hear, let me know. Thank you. And I'll do my best to answer your questions. Okay. We're going to jump right into it. Y'all joined us this evening to get on with things here. All right. We have 3 meetings teed up here. I think we'll only get to 2, but we've got 3. First one is the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, the RCA, finally met with the legislature, met with Senate Finance today. And they gave an explanation of what their relationship is with this pipeline project, and we're going to review that a little bit. There's some questions towards the end that are key, and we need to just kind of understand what is the process here going forward. That is the second half of the Senate Finance meeting today. The first half of the Senate Finance meeting was additional questions from committee members with John Sims from Enstar, which I think is a pretty important meeting as well to preview here or review. And then in House Finance, they were going over amendments to House Bill 381. And we can preview that if people want to see that. It's sausage making at its best, and maybe there are some things that you want to ask questions about, so we can preview that. we're going to jump into the RCA conversation because it is probably the least understood of the three at this point, of the three topics that we could talk about tonight. So I want to jump in there and help people understand what the RCA is, what it does, and how it impacts or doesn't impact the project, what its relationship is. So that's where we're gonna jump to. Okay. Yeah, Frank, someone introduced me. All right, let's go here.
Identify yourself and introduce the rest of your commission to the Finance Committee.
For the record and through the chair, my name is John F. Condola, Chair of the Regulatory Commission of Alaska.
I've got the volume turned up as much as I can on the broadcast here. This is a series of commissioners on the phone to the committee, saving the taxpayers' dollars by not traveling to Juneau. Maybe they should have gone, but anyway, it serves its purpose tonight. It's a little hard to hear, and I cannot do anything about that.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing the Regulatory Commission of Alaska the opportunity to present to the Senate Finance Committee. Today I am joined by my colleagues, Commissioner Steve DeVries and Commissioner Julie Vogler, both here with me to present. They are also available to help answer questions the committee may have. Next slide, please.
Please proceed.
We are here today to cover a few topics requested by the committee. The first item we will cover is our high-level understanding of the project, which by now this committee is very familiar with. The next items will address our commission pipeline jurisdiction, the State Right-of-Way Leasing Act, our role in the project, and last, Commissioner Vogler will speak to additional commission roles as they relate to gas supply contracts.
It's not going to take very long for them to get through these topics on their slides, and then there's some questions at the end where we really dive into things.
Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. Our understanding is that phase one of the project will focus on construction of the pipeline to address the critical need for in-state gas supply due to the imminent natural gas shortfall in the rail belt. Phase two will build out remaining elements required to treat, transport, and liquefy gas for export. Now, Commissioner Steve DeVries will speak to commission jurisdiction as it relates to pipelines. Next slide, please.
For the record,
Which slide are you on?
We are at slide 4.
Slide 4, okay. Please proceed.
Okay, for the record, this is Steve DeVries. I'm a commissioner with the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. Just a brief overview of the pipeline jurisdiction that the commission holds. It's generally held under two specific sets of statutes. The Pipeline Act, which is AS 4206, and the AS 4208, which pertains to contract carriage pipeline jurisdiction. Under 4206, our jurisdiction is generally set for common carrier status, and that status is specifically limited to situations where we have a common carrier pipe. 4208 jurisdiction applies when we have contract carriage situations. There's also a bullet there that provides statutory references to specific carve-outs for exclusions from our jurisdiction where federal jurisdiction applies. Those statutes are, in essence, just a restatement of federal preemption, which would, on a constitutional level, bar us from maintaining any state jurisdiction over in an area where federal jurisdiction is otherwise exclusive. But we do have state statutes that provide for the same criteria. If we can move to unless there's questions, we can move to the next slide.
Next.
So common carrier, let me back that up just a little bit here, just so everybody's understanding here. Two jurisdictions on the different, jurisdictions on two different types of pipeline, common carrier and contract carrier. So a good way to think about this common carriers like pipelines that serve the public, rates, terms, and conditions are often publicly available, whereas a contract carrier is serving a specific customer or customers, and rates and terms are generally negotiated and they're not public. Okay, so two different types of regulation of pipeline. In this context, and what we just heard from FERC, and it continues on here, the RCA has preempted, FERC has preempted regulation of the pipeline project of this, I didn't say project, but of the pipeline. So RCA really has no say, no regulatory authority, no jurisdiction in this pipeline because the federal government, the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, I think that's what that is. Anyway, FERC is federal government regulation, preempts state regulation of the pipeline.
Unless there's questions, we can move to the next slide.
Next slide, slide 5.
Okay, the next slide talks about the State Right-of-Way Leasing Act. This is generally where Commission pipeline jurisdiction arises under AS 4206 and AS 4205. Under the State Right-of-Way Leasing Act, a state lease for right-of-way purposes carries with it by statute an obligation for the pipeline carrier to hold itself out as a as a common carrier that's under AS 835-120 subsection A1. And in situations where contract carriage is contemplated, then jurisdiction is carried through under the subsequent statute, AS 835-121. Those are the two statutory bases for the Commission's pipeline jurisdiction as it currently exists under existing law. I'd now turn it over to Commissioner Espindola to talk about the Commission's role in the pipeline project as we understand it. If you could turn to the next slide, that would be slide 6.
Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, and for the record, John Espindola with the Regulatory Commission. We understand the two phases of the project are still under the purview of FERC jurisdiction, as we have not seen a different determination of jurisdiction in the FERC docket. Under its 2020 decision, jurisdiction lies entirely with FERC for both in-state and export as it relates to the AKLNG project. Now I will turn it over to Commissioner Vogler to provide an overview on the Commission's authority as it relates to gas supply contracts. Next slide, please.
Mr. Vogler.
For the record, Julie Vogler, through the chair, AS 4205-141D, adopted by the legislature in 2010, requires specific consideration by the Commission when determining whether to approve a gas supply contract that provides a reliable supply of gas for a reasonable price. I will note here that this statute was implemented when utilities were entering into gas supply contracts with Cook Inlet producers. LNG imports and North Slope gas was not yet contemplated. AS 4205-141D requires the Commission to recognize the public benefits of allowing the utility to negotiate different pricing mechanisms with different suppliers and to maintain a diversified portfolio of gas supply contracts, thereby protecting consumers from the risks of inadequate supply or excessive costs that may arise from a single pricing mechanism, and to consider whether the utility could meet its responsibility to the public in a timely manner and without undue risk to the public if the Commission fails to approve the proposed gas supply contract. When a utility files a gas sales contract with the Commission, the utility addresses the statute, demonstrating that the contract is in the public interest. It is the Commission's duty to ensure that gas supply contracts are in the public interest and protect consumers from excessive costs. This requires a known, reliable, and deliverable supply of natural gas to a point of use.
These parts of the statute were not originally in the statute governing or setting up the RCA. They were added in subsequent years when it was clear that the RCA was making decisions that weren't considering long-term implications of running out of gas. And so this is supposed to be what the RCA takes into consideration when they're looking specifically at supply contracts, gas supply contracts. Is this contract in the keeping of diversified portfolios, and is it keeping us, moving in the direction of consistent gas for Alaskans?
And there I will turn it over to Chair Escondola for the next slide, or open it up to any questions.
We have questions, Senator Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is Senator Kaufman, and I kind of want to slow down a little bit. This was
okay. He's going to ask some questions about the different types of carriers. I want to jump to Senator Keel's question, and I think it's a real pertinent conversation here that we need to review.
How deeply into the elements of that price is the commission charged by law in looking? And I'll just, again, right, my district doesn't have any gas, but on more than one occasion over the decades, the RCA and its predecessor have said to a utility, you can't include element X or element Y in the rates you charge customers because they're gold plated or they're not truly necessary, or you have some standards you apply. How deeply into the elements of a gas contract price do you look? Are you charged with looking?
Okay, Senator Keel, through the chair, this is Steve DeVries. There's a big difference in how the commission reviews costs to consumers from gas supply contracts and how the commission reviews all other costs. And the reason for that is because there's a specific provision in Title 42, and that statute is on slide 7.
We just saw that.
Which specifically and narrowly constrains our review authority. And so it's very, very different in the structure of what we can and what we can do, and the criteria that we use to evaluate gas supply contracts versus other costs that are incurred by a utility in providing the services that they do to consumers. One thing not mentioned in the statute, which is a requirement that we look at in all contexts, is prudence. A imprudently incurred cost is one that is generally excluded from rates. That's a general high-level discussion point at this point, but in essence, that's a rule of thumb that is also applied to all contract costs or all utility-related costs that are flowed through to consumers.
And to follow up,
Senator Keel.
So thank you, Commissioner. Did I understand you then to say that you don't consider prudence when you look at a gas supply contract?
Senator Keel, through the chair, no, we would look at prudence if the issue is raised. Utility practices are presumed prudent unless they are challenged when a cost is being reviewed by us in a docket. It is when they are challenged and a record is developed that shows that it is likely or that serious questions have been raised as to the prudent practices or prudent utility practice of a utility in question that calls the prudence of that decision into question, then it would be before us to adjudicate. But in other situations, and utility management decisions are considered prudent unless challenged in that matter.
Senator Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to delve just a little deeper on that, I'll draw you a ridiculous and absurd example so that we don't get into pre-adjudicating anything. If this in-state phase of a gas line is built and all of the compressors are solid gold, and every employee is chauffeured in a Bentley, but all Enstar is able to bring you is a final gas cost, and that is challenged. Can you look at the prudence of the elements of that cost?
Through the chair, for the record, John Espandola, Regulatory Commission. Yes, we would, and that would be determined in an adjudicatory proceeding based on a full record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's helpful to understand how that works.
Thank you, Senator Keel. Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. You know, one of the hot button issues as we're considering the gas line proposal, folks, the consumers are worried about how we're going to assure that they're getting the lowest possible cost of gas, considering all the logistics or restrictions and things that we have to deal with. And in that line of thought, I anticipate a day where you're looking at approving contracts that where the big picture option may be bringing gas through this gas line project, should it get constructed, purchasing gas on the open market in liquid form, and then having to go through all the cost of transportation, changing it, shifting it from liquid to gas,
Importing it.
and the cost that's implied with that. And then along with that is the potential that there's other smaller sources of it, of gas inside Alaska.
Cook Inlet.
And how they sit with this whole big system.
The reason that he's speaking in generalities is because the RCA has already refused to answer questions based on their quasi-judicial role of having to adjudicate an issue that might come up. So they're very hesitant or refuse to speculate. And that's what the legislature needs people to do, is speculate for them. Tell me what if. Answer my what if question for me. And the RCA is like, nah, we're not going to do that. So Senator Kaufman's trying to get into this hypothetical situation so that we play that game. And we're not actually talking about this pipeline. We're talking about a hypothetical pipeline and a hypothetical situation.
For the folks out there, could you just go over all that you're going to consider as you're looking at these contracts, and what you might be taking into account to assure that the ratepayers are going to be getting the lowest possible cost of gas?
For the record, Julie Vogler, through the chair. So I've been listening to some of the presentations presented by John Sims, and just in that instance, my understanding there's going to be 3 contracts in one. Without having that contract in front of us, we do not know what's going to be proposed, what will be presented, how they will satisfy the requirements of 4205 141D. So those are unknowns to us at this time.
So the RCA is not going to play hypothetical with Senator Kaufman. They're like, we haven't seen a contract. We know we're talking about a gas line from the North Slope. We know we're talking about a contract with Enstar. Until we see it, we're not talking about it.
Senator Kaufman. Does a member have the question that Senator Stedman had?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just bringing that back up.
Senator Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question posed by another member of the committee who's not able to be with us this afternoon, Commissioners, was about how costs of a spur line may be allocated. If this pipeline is built and we have a line that runs in to connect its supply with the interior gas utility, does the law allow that cost to be spread across all consumers in the state, all gas consumers in the state?
Through the chair, for the record, John Espandola, Regulatory Commission of Alaska, to Senator Keel. It's an open question regarding jurisdiction and cost for the spur lines, because we don't know how they'll be construed in terms of the project as a whole. So it's an unknown at this time.
Meaning they've already testified that the pipeline project is not their jurisdiction, unless FERC steps back and says it's no longer under our jurisdiction. So if the spur line is part of the project and it moves forward as part of the project, well, then it falls underneath FERC. That's the question as to, well, we don't know. Because is it part of the project or isn't it? If the project goes forward and then you add a spur line later, well, then there's some argument to be said that it's not part of the project because the project got FID'd, it got built, it got done, by itself without the spur line, and the spur line got added later. So now it's not part of the project. It's not part of the FERC issue. Now, I don't know whether the spur line gets built underneath the FERC permitting or whether it has to get permitted itself, which probably it has to get permitted itself. I don't know. That's why they don't know. They're not going to speculate.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask what the elements are that will be considered? Please don't weight them. Please don't get us into any pre-decisional discussion. Simply a description for my understanding of what the elements are that the commission would need to consider.
Senator Keel, through the chair, this is Steve DeVries. If what you're talking about is how rates would be set if the commission had jurisdiction over a spur line, then it would be set in one of two ways. It would either be set under AS 4206 as a common carrier, or if it was a contract carrier situation, it would be set by contract under AS 4208. The mechanisms by which the commission approves or disapproves or requires modifications to a tariff under the common carrier requirements of AS 4206 are generally well known. A pipeline would present a tariff. We would review it for reasonableness and determine whether or not the rates that are proposed are just and reasonable after taking into consideration any interveners' objections or evaluations of the issues that are presented. It would be a general adjudicatory decision. If your question is, would rates be structured on a postage stamp versus a mile per barrel? Usually, I mean, I recognize that's an oil term rather than a gas term, but mileage basis, that would have to be determined in the docket itself as well. We can't prejudge or predetermine what would be the proper way or what would be the allowed way that such a cost structure would evolve depending on it would have to depend on the facts presented to us at that particular time. I hope that's answered your question.
So I hope you're getting a flavor for how the RCA approaches a problem set before them, which is, if there was a spur line, what would we be looking at? But just anything in general, right? Anytime the RCA is looking at something, they're looking at it kind of from the lens as judges. Okay. So there's Frank says, they're not just looking at the lowest cost to the ratepayers. No, they're not. That is part of it. And that's part of the purpose for the RCA was established to make sure that Alaskans don't get gouged. But there is a lot more that goes into this. And they like when they were talking about the docket and other people bringing in information that they would have to consider. Right. So that's somebody, has an opinion and brings it forward to this particular thing that they're considering. And then the judges, the commissioners, the judges then have to consider that opinion as well, or may consider that opinion. So the point that I'm getting at is the power of whether the power of approval comes down to a handful of people in the RCA for whether the rates that are being established under certain contracts are something that is going to be accepted by the state of Alaska, the authority of the state. And so who gets to serve on the RCA? You didn't vote for the members of the RCA, right? They never showed up on a ballot box. You don't vote them in. You vote in the members of your utility. who are going to enter into contracts for energy for you. You don't vote for RCA members, they get appointed. Anyway, I hope this helps understand that this RCA process is best described as a quasi-judicial situation here, where they are the judge of whether something is fair and meets the statutory requirements, and it is up to them. That's it. So if you don't want the RCA to be having jurisdiction, then the legislature needs to write into the statute that they do not have jurisdiction. Similarly, FERC has the constitutional authority, U.S. constitutional authority, to preempt the state law. So FERC is in control until they step back and say, we no longer have control, we no longer want control, and then the RCA would then step in. So again, this is the situation. If the project and the contracts going forward for this issue, for this project, are of such a nature that the RCA adjudication is a risk to the project, is a risk to the contract that gets agreed upon between the Glenfarne and Enstar, then the legislature ought to consider taking preemptive action to say, hey, look, this project's not within your jurisdiction. And they could modify the law to take it out of their jurisdiction. Now, whether that's wise or not, I don't know at this point in time. All I recognize is that you've got a handful of people who are not elected making this decision, and you've got a whole handful of elected people here that could influence that decision. But once the legislature is acted and done with a special session, passes the bill on, then they have to come back into a special session to fix a problem that the RCA creates. I don't know. That's as much as I wanted to dive into that, is just to say that the legislature has authority to define the jurisdiction of the RCA with regard to this project, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to check your questions, and then we're going to jump to whoa, that's not the one I wanted. Jump to the the Senate Finance meeting from earlier. Yeah, there's a confirmation process for RCA members. In the long run, LNG imports would cost you more than what is pumped through the pipeline. In the long run, that is true, because the price escalation of the market price escalation of LNG on the open market is likely to increase in price, not decrease. Federal preemptions. Who talks about that? I don't know who talks about that, Frank. The RCA is talking about it now. Whether the legislature continues to talk about it, not sure what you're getting at. This is the world we live in, where when the federal government decides that they are going to exert their authority, then throw federalism out the window. Federal government now has control. You've been talking about it. Okay. Well, now we're talking about it, Frank. Now it's out in the open. All right. Let's jump to the Senate Finance meeting from earlier in this morning's meeting. This was the second part of that we just previewed. Let's jump to the first part. Let's watch the first part second. And we're going to get in here and hear from John Sims. Let me add that to the stage, because there we go. That's what you need.
Sims is the president of Enstar. Please introduce yourself and give us the lowdown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Sims. I'm the president of Enstar Natural Gas Company, born and raised Alaskan. My kids are actually fifth generation Alaskans. I've been the president at Enstar since 2017, and I've been with the company for 21 years. in my spare time, I'm a high school baseball coach, and I just want to give a shout out to the Juneau boys who came up to Anchorage and whooped up on some some other baseball teams there and won the state championship. So congratulations to the Juneau team. But anyway, the real reason I'm here, I wanted to dive into Enstar. I wanted to touch on some foundational information that I think is really important for the committee and for the legislature to understand, and then dive into some of the Glenfarne contracts that we're currently working on. So just to start off, hopefully some of you have seen this slide before. This slide represents a historical production profile on an annual basis. So you can see back in the 80s and 90s with, roughly 300 BCF of gas produced on an annual basis, significant volumes. And that's during the time when there was LNG export and also when the Agrium plant was up and running, producing fertilizer that was also shipped out. Now for perspective, Enstar on an annual basis, we deliver about 35 to 40 BCF a year. So you can see back in the 80s and 90s, someone in my position was typically sitting in their office with their feet up, having great days. It's a little different today with the gas supply crunch. You can see in the 2026 timeframe now, the annual production coming from Cook Inlet is hovering right around 60 to 70 BCF a year. And that represents the total consumption by Cook Inlet natural gas users. So you've got all the utilities and you've got the Marathon refinery and also some production that's utilizing natural gas out there, but a significant decline since then. So gas supply is really a function of two different things. It's about the annual demand, the annual volumes that you need, but also the daily demands. So for example, in the summertime, like on a day like today, the demand for Cook Inlet gas for Enstar is hovering right around 40 million a day. When you look at the wintertime though, we have a peak design day of 320 that our customers potentially could use on those long cold spells where it's 20 below in Anchorage or in the Valley. And so here we've got a little bit more compressed time frame. We're showing 2010 to 2026, but you can see in 2010, we used to be producing on a daily basis. And when I say we, that's the royal we from Cook Inlet, the producers there. We used to be producing on a daily basis around 350 to 300 million cubic feet a day. So you can see that most of our customers' needs were met just coming straight from production. As that has transitioned over time, we are now in a place where we're getting about 200 million a day. And again, going back to what Enstar needs in the wintertime, it's upwards of 300 million a day. So how do we serve our customers? We utilize natural gas storage that we can, fill and make sure we meet that demand. This is a really, really busy slide that I'm just going to touch on a couple things. On the left, what you see is the variance on an annual basis for that daily demand that I was talking about. The heavy red line on the top represents what we call our design day. That's the scenario where extreme cold, prolonged winter days, our customer demand can reach up to 320. The gray bars represent what's typical for Enstar. So we don't always expect that 320, but we have to make sure that we have it just in case. On the right, what we're showing there is the variance on warmer temperatures. So you can see that weather selection heating degree days. Anytime you get into the 10,000s or above, that's a really, really cold winter. For example, the last winter that we just got through was a cold, cold winter. And you can see the annual demand there, about 37.9 BCF or 38 BCF. What's important here is the next year, 2029, and these are forecasted, the next year we're forecasting a warm weather, and you can see the variance. Enstar goes from needing 38 BCF down to 30 BCF. So there's a significant swing in demand depending on what that temperature may or may not be. That's really all this was intended to show. So believe it or not, some of you may remember that the Cook Inlet was going through challenges before, back in 2008, 2009, back when the commission was rejecting natural gas contracts that the utilities brought to them. Marathon decided that they were going to shut down activity, and we started having a hard time getting natural gas contracts with the producers for our customers. So at that time, Enstar, Chugach Electric, and Municipal Light and Power, ML&P, hired Petrotechnical Resources of Alaska to do a study on what it would take from an activity perspective in the Cook Inlet to meet the demand of the utilities and Cook Inlet users going out to 2020. And just to quickly summarize there on the right, the bottom line is they figured that we would need about 185 wells from 2010 to 2020 to meet demand. That would require an estimated $1.8 to $2.8 billion of investment by a producer to go out and do that work. And the bottom line, if there wasn't an average of 13.6 wells completed per year, that the shortage of gas would occur in 2018. That study you can find on the Petrotechnical Resources of Alaska website right there. I sent the link. But it's important and kind of interesting to see what actually happened since then. Hillcorp came in. And this was a slide I pulled from their presentation to House Resources this year in January of 28. And they show that in 2012 to 2025, Hillcorp produced over 750 BCF and drilled over 192 wells over that time frame. So again, good job by PRA in forecasting what the needs were going to be for activity. They guessed 185. Turns out it was 192. And Hillcorp spent over $1.5 billion over that time to drill those wells. This is just depicting and showing the number of wells that were drilled by Hillcorp versus the other producers. And again, you can see a majority of the activity, especially in the last 5 years, has been from Hillcorp. I mentioned earlier that there are two things that are required for gas supply and meeting the needs of your customers. One is annual demand, so the BCF volume. The second thing is having the daily demand required for those peak swings. The third thing is the balance sheet to actually go out there and drill 192 wells over a 10-year period. So it's important when you think about the other producers that are out there. You've got Fury, who has been doing a great job in the Cook Inlet. They are the second largest producer in the Cook Inlet. And you can see over the last couple of years, since 2011, they have drilled 14 wells. That's not the function of a lack of demand. That's the function of not having the balance sheet to go out there and do the activity that's necessary. They've done a phenomenal job, as I mentioned. They doubled production from 10 million to 25 million a day. Reminder, Enstar needs 320. So significantly far away from what we need to be able to serve customers. Last slide that I pulled from Hillcorp, this is just showing prices. These slides here, one, the top line that's kind of curving upwards, that reflects a since expired consent decree that was reached with Hillcorp and the Attorney General in order for them to come in and acquire all the assets of the Cook Inlet. The bottom line represents the cost of gas that they've been charging to Enstar and other customers. You can see that's hovering around the mid-8s from a dollar perspective. The lower star there represents a contract that Enstar entered into with Fury. That we are receiving that gas today. The contract price was $13.69. And in the contract, it said if Fury received royalty relief, the price would drop down to $12.30. So $12.30 is what we're paying under that contract. Because of the cold temperatures that we had this past year, we didn't have the gas under contract that we need for our customers. So we reached out to Hillcorp. They were able to give us another half a BCF of gas. That gas came at $16 per MCF. So the trend is going up, and we don't see any opportunity for that to be reduced from a cost perspective. This is our daily delivery profile that we receive from Hillcorp. This contract expires in 2033. It represents about 80 to 90% of the gas volumes that we purchase on an annual basis. And you can see the significant swings there from the summer, fall, up to the winter, where we're receiving 162 million a day from Hillcorp. Again, Fury's max production is 25 million a day that they're receiving, so quite a far ways away from what we need.
Senator Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. So if you buy gas at, let's just say, the $16, how much more does it cost to deliver that gas?
Through the chair, Senator Cronk, good question. So the Enstar delivery charge that's on top of that is right around $3 per MCF. So for that $16 gas, you're looking at about $19 delivered. Now, the caveat to that is we take those prices and we bundle them all together and file them with the commission in what we call our gas cost adjustment. So it takes all of the volumes from what you're seeing here, which is right around $8.50, the $12.30 from Fury, and then that $16 gas, average it all together, and that results in a weighted average cost of gas of about $10.80 is what our customers are paying today.
Senator Cronk. Thank you, Senator Cronk. Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've been talking here at the table and having presentations and using 16 cents for this gas line we're talking about building, plus
$16
plus additional fee. So the Anchorage customers then would be looking at 19, 20 cents somewhere around.
Through the chair, Senator Stedman. So $16 per MCF is what's been talked about, not cents.
Right.
Yeah. So moving and transitioning to either a pipeline or an LNG situation, the dollars are upwards of $16 in any scenario that we're looking at today. And I'll get into those in more detail later on in the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this is a presentation that HEX gave to ADA on May 13th of this year.
You know, I just realized something that I didn't pick up on earlier. Just dawned on me with hearing this presentation. I'm going to back this up just a minute to make my point. We are at about 12:41. So let me back up here, see if I can find the right slide. There, that's the slide I wanted. So what Sim said was that this $8 line, this green line, represents here's the consent decree price cap. So this is, if I'm understanding correctly, this is RCA agreed price. An emergency purchase became $16. If this is the agreed upon price, this is what RCA has allowed, and this is what was charged in emergency to be able to supply gas in emergency. I assume the RCA bought off on that in emergency, or maybe they didn't have to. I'm not sure. But we're now having a conversation going forward that gas is $16. We're not having a conversation about what RCA gas contracts were approved at is the price going forward. You see that? You see that nuance there? We're not. Industry is not referencing what RCA has agreed to. They're referencing what industry has required, what the market has required for emergency gas. So I wonder if that is necessary. I don't know. Like, I haven't had a conversation with Sims or with producers to understand whether the difference between what the RCA has agreed to in the past and versus what has been charged for emergency, whether this delta, this upward shift is absolutely necessary, or whether this is just you don't have any choice. Like, you want to run out of gas. Okay, you're going to pay $16 because that's what we're going to charge. Is that really the floor? Would the RCA call it the floor if we're having the same conversation? And I don't know, does this factor into the conversation with regard to the contract that's going to be signed with Glenfarne at $16? Does the RCA look at it and say, well, wait a second, the last contract that we agreed to was actually this $8 range? Yeah, I get it. You bought it at an emergency, but this isn't an emergency. We're talking about massive amounts of gas coming down the pipeline. Does it really need to be 16? I don't know. Something doesn't sit well here, and maybe I need some additional questions to be answered to fully understand this. But that, to me, that seems like a shift based on emergency, not based on what the actual gas would be allowed to be charged via contract in under normal circumstances. Yeah, I get it. Enstar pays the $16, and Enstar is going to pay the $16 from the pipeline. All I'm saying is that the last regulatory action appears to be somewhere half of that. And I'm the one that's been making the argument that we would not have a gas problem if we were paying market rates. If the gas had always been able to, if the market had always been able to charge what the market needs, then maybe we would have more producers out in Cook Inlet competing because they can actually sell their gas for what they need to stay in business. And competition would help keep that price down. Why do I have to buy it from Hillcorp? Because they're the only ones producing it. I mean, yes, Hex Ferry's producing a little bit, Cook Inlet Energy producing a little bit, but not enough. So I have to go to Hillcorp. They're the big player. So how do you get Hillcorp to lower their prices? You have other big players producing more gas. That you can't just flip that switch on and they start producing. I mean, it takes time and building up that infrastructure in the Cook Inlet, right? Would we have the same problem today with lack of producers if we were not talking about $8 gas over the past years? What is that? It's it was $7.78 in 23, and it was $7 between $7 and $7.78 for since 2017 timeframe. So 8 years or so. It broke the $7 range before that's when it broke in 2017. Before that, it was always less than $7. So the point that I'm getting at is we've had a steady upward price of gas, but we've also had fewer and fewer producers or wells being drilled. So that green line that the RCA is agreeing to prices, that green line likely needed to be steeper to incentivize gas production, more wells being drilled, because we recognized a steady increase in prices, but not a steady increase in the amount of gas. Anyway, okay, that is a rabbit hole that I got off on. Let's jump back to Sims here if I can get us back to where we were, 14 something, right? Ooh.
During a time where we had a contract dispute, they were interested in charging the price to consumers not inclusive of royalty relief, and we fought that pretty hard. Ultimately, we were able to work it out and started buying gas for them again. But it was the
let's back it up
job that they have been doing in the Cook Inlet. Again, doubling production from about 10 million a day upwards of 25 million a day. And right now, we buy about 20 million a day from Hex. And they have done a great job, but again, not enough to supplant the Hillcorp contract when it expires.
Senator Kaufman.
I'm just wondering about that second red comment, Enstar elected not to buy gas?
Through the chair, Senator Kaufman, yes. So that was during a time where we had a contract dispute. They were interested in charging the price to consumers not inclusive of royalty relief, and we fought that pretty hard. Ultimately, we were able to work it out and started buying gas for them again. But it was the month of February where we stopped buying gas while we were in that contract dispute, got it resolved, and started buying again in March.
Senator Kaufman.
And I guess the makeup gas for that was out of storage, or what was carrying the volumes during that period?
Through the chair, Senator Kaufman, that's a great question. If you'll remember, we had a bit of a reprieve from a weather perspective in Anchorage. You probably don't remember because you were down here. But and so it actually warmed up a little bit. Now, we did end up having to buy that additional gas from Hillcorp in March because of that. But it was a combination of gas coming from storage, gas coming from other producers, and the fact that it warmed up in the month of February that kind of helped out with that situation.
Senator Kaufman.
I was here, but I don't remember my gas bills going down. But anyway.
Thank you, Senator Kaufman. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This slide is pulled from the commissioner's final findings and determination for kitchen lights unit. And I've heard some discussion about the potential of royalty relief, sort of saving the cook inlet and bringing more gas to market. And I don't think there's any doubt that it'd bring more gas to market, but what's important is how much more gas would it bring? And so what this shows here is kind of a projection of the end of field life, which is the middle column there. And you can see that scenario 5, normal price, they thought that there was a possibility it could extend out to December of 2036 with the royalty relief granted. And in that scenario, if you go over one column to the right, you can see that cumulative production from September 2024 to December of 2036 represents 68,369 million cubic feet. That equates to 68 BCF of gas. So over a 12-year period with royalty relief, getting the equivalent of about 6 BCF a year. So again, not enough to meet the 35 to 40 BCF of gas that Enstar consumers need on an annual basis. And that doesn't even include the electric utilities who have additional requirements. This is just a summary slide that shows.
So it's not necessarily that gas is not in Cook Inlet. It's that there aren't enough producers and enough wells being drilled to provide it. And that is a cost effective. It's a decision based on cost effectiveness of our capital to go get more gas. Again, if the RCA is going to put a downwards pressure on the price, producers are going to walk because they can't make money doing it. They're going to go somewhere else.
On the black line, it reflects our forecasted demand. And then you can see all the colors there represent the contracts or the gas that's withdrawn from storage to meet that demand. So the green, whether it's dark green or light green, that represents our Hillcorp contract that expires in 2033. And you can see how that is meeting a significant portion of Enstar's demand through that time. The red represents Fury, and then that pinkish color represents Fury gas that we expect to receive, but it isn't contracted for. And then all of the blue is the gas that we pull out of storage, or in those warmer months where you can see it going below zero, that's where we're injecting into storage. So we're purchasing gas from the producers, injecting it so that we can pull it out during those colder times when the demand increases in the wintertime.
Rick asked a question that I don't know have an answer to. Does MEA have a contract with Enstar, or do they buy direct? If they are using gas, I would assume they're buying it from Enstar. If they're buying it direct, then they would have to have their own pipeline from from the producer. So I'm guessing that the pipeline exists, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'm assuming that it's through Enstar. Frank, I'm not sure what KKS is. Wait till KKS want to protect Cook Inlet. Please help me understand.
So now kind of getting into the meat of the presentation and probably what you're most interested in, that's kind of the plans for Enstar over the long term.
That is what we're interested in.
We do have needs for additional storage. We have an application in with the Regulatory Commission of Alaska for a predetermination of prudency that will allow us to develop additional storage for when that Hillcorp contract expires and to accept more Cook Inlet production if it's available. The main focus, though, for us has been the Glenfarne agreements. We've been negotiating with them for about a year now, and we're negotiating a large gas supply agreement, which is a 30-year term. And underneath that gas supply agreement, there are three main contracts. The first contract is a framework agreement. It's got key definitions, but most importantly, it discusses the transition from the LNG import terminal to the pipeline and how that process is going to work and what the rates are going to be, et cetera. The LNG import terminal then is a separate agreement for just importing natural gas. Then you've got the phase one pipeline, which is the in-state pipeline portion. That's the third contract. Enstar is not providing any equity for either of these projects. Back in 2024, we were contemplating making an investment in the LNG import terminal. And then on the floor in 2024, HB 307, Amendment 14, with the exception of one vote, the entire House voted to prohibit LNG facilities or infrastructure being recovered by utilities and rates. Now, that didn't eventually become law, but it definitely made our board step back and say, hold on, is this an investment that we want to make if we can't recover the cost from customers? Ultimately, that amendment cost us about a year in a planning, from a planning perspective, where we didn't have the opportunity to go forward with that. So we had to kind of shake things up. And now Glen Farne is 100% on the hook for those LNG import facilities, as opposed to us sharing that. One of the most important points, and I've heard a lot of discussion about protection from customers or for customers, there is no scenario in which a gas supply agreement with Enstar and Glen Farne is not filed with the commission. So we will 100%, as soon as I execute that contract, I will be filing that with the Regulatory Commission of Alaska for their review and for their approval. A utility is not allowed to charge any rates or any fees on its bill without the approval of the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. So that will be going to the commission as soon as I've executed the contract.
This is understatement.
Can the utility invest and take the risk of the phase one pipeline as an equity holder?
Through the chair, Senator Stedman, yes, it could. But again, to have it charged to customers, it would have to get approval from the RCA.
Okay. Well,
There's nothing that specifically prohibits a utility from making an investment. The question is whether or not you can collect those charges on utility bills.
so what you're telling me is the regulator then would allow you to have extensive risk exposure, unable to collect payment for it, and bankrupt the utility? Is that what you're telling me?
If a utility chooses to make an investment in infrastructure, that is up to the choice of the utility. In order for it to be recovered in bills, the commission would have to determine yay or nay on that. So there are investments that we make, granted, not as large as a pipeline coming down from the North Slope, but there are investments that we make that don't have immediate cost recovery from an investment perspective.
Okay.
Now, I'm sorry, the commission could deem an investment imprudent and, ask the question or call the utility to the commission to see if there's sort of managerial imprudence going on with an investment that they would make. But again, Enstar is not contemplating any equity ownership or investment in either of these projects, the LNG import or the pipelines.
Okay. Very, very important point here. Okay. Enstar's taking his cue from the legislature. This says, we don't want the market to take care of this. We're going to force business to play our game, basically. Okay. Do not allow the market to be able to recover costs for development and producing gas. Okay. This is the mindset of the legislature. The legislature had to change the statute with regard to the RCA to narrow the requirements that they were looking at. And that's the slides the information that we looked at, where it said, hey, you got to think about the future. You got to weigh the future. All of that got added because the decisions were not taking that into consideration. Okay. So I just wanted to segue here for just a second and show you what actually happened. Sims is pointing out what happened in the 2024 legislature. Yours truly was sitting there. I remember this conversation. So I'm going to share this tab with you and pop this open here so I can see. There we go. Okay. This is the AKLNG website. The background is grayed out because that's a previous legislature. This bill that we're looking at here, current status is it was passed. Okay. So it's signed into law. That's state law of Alaska. 2024. This was a governor's bill, an act relating to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. Okay. So we scroll down here. This is all the different votes that happened within the House. And I'm looking for the vote that took place on the floor. Passed on reconsideration. Okay. So there it is. On May 14th. So right before the end of the session, right? Again, right before the end of the session, throw this monumental bill out here and we're going to have a vote on it. Passed 36-4. We can click on this and it'll take us to the actual votes. So here are the votes in favor of letting the market sort it out. This is the votes of supporting the governor's bill and telling Enstar you're not going to charge customers, not going to be able to recoup the costs in the market. Okay. That's the vote that actually happened. It wasn't, with one exception, it was within 4. Okay. So that's one vote that happened. Then it goes to the Senate, right? So these are all Senate votes. We'll look and see what happened in the Senate. Senate passed 18-2. So we jump over here. There are your 18 votes. There are your two nay votes. Interesting, huh? And then it came down to the concurrence. House concurrence. And there's the concurrence vote. Concurred with the changes made in the other body. Again, 4 people voting against it. So Sims is partially correct. There were actually 4 people that resisted what the legislature was attempting to do. Okay, I thought that was interesting. Okay, let's go back to this video.
Understatement.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So several years ago, we were looking at a project going down the continent, and we were told by the administration that the utilities in the Midwest could finance it. And that was erroneous information. They could not finance it. The regulators would not allow the utilities to extend.
Yeah, that was my vote, Chris. I remember the pressure that was being put on, and I did not want the government stepping in this regard. I thought that it would be a mistake. And that was not just the only thing that bill did, but if I'm not mistaken, I could be confusing 2 different bills. I voted against another bill that was it allowed electrical rates to be shopped across the entire beltway without actually being able to transition the electrons across the beltway. And I was opposed to that as well. Not opposed to shopping the rates, making a unified rate structure across once we have the ability to transfer electrons all the way across the grid. But getting the cart before the horse, and then the horse never materializing, right? Now you've got this ability to charge. So if one utility in Anchorage wants to slit their own throat and go down this nonsense of renewables, and all it does is end up raising the cost of electricity, and then you're going to shop that rate with other utilities across the state to lower the rate, which increases our rate because of bad choices you made. I was against the state authorizing that to take place, to give that ability to the state. I voted against that as well. Anyway, water under the bridge at this point.
Themselves into that type of a risk exposure and basically put the rate holders on the hook. If you charge them or not, if it's a liability on your balance sheet, you got to feed it. So I would question that answer, frankly, that you've got the ability to extend the utility to the point of insolvency. I don't, and if that's in fact the case, then we probably have some statutory cleanup to do.
Well, Senator Steadman, through the chair, as I mentioned, Enstar has no intention or desire to invest in either project, and we will not be doing so. So I think that, the necessary review by the commission is kind of irrelevant because there is no investment happening by Enstar or its parent company for that matter.
Not a trustworthy environment.
Yeah, I think we can check into that. I think I'd be shocked if you're able to do it if you wanted to. The other point that I'm concerned about dealing with the rail belt, and I'm not a rail belt senator, obviously, but we're supposed to look at the whole state, and that's the overall cost of the project. And there's a opportunity for the gas line to be debt financed, the debt portion backed by the federal government with government guaranteed loans on, I assume, default, because they don't normally guarantee late debt service payments, but against default, and lowering the rate of interest to the project. And my understanding is Glen Farm is not going to pursue government-backed debt financing. They're going to go into the private market. And if the spread is 100 basis points or 1%, because we've been told at the federal level, it's going to be federal bond rate. If it's 20 years, it's plus 3/8, 20-year bond rate, or 30-year bond rate plus 3/8. So you just look up the rate, right? So just say it is 1%. That is a extremely costly financial maneuver to whoever in the state has to pay for it. And the majority of it, if we're stuck with the in-state gas line, we don't get to phase 2, is going to be the people in the corridor of the rail belt. And you're looking at significant amount of funds.
How would that be the case? It's like you can make a statement like this, Senator Steadman, because that's what you believe, but how would it be the case? How would it be the case that if the project was more expensive or the debt was more expensive, the financing terms weren't as favorable as what we thought, and the project was more expensive, how would it be the case that the rest of us are going to pay for it if the contract doesn't allow it? If the statute that you write in says you can't charge the cost overruns to the consumers, how is that the case? It isn't. It isn't the case. We're saying it is because we want to make some kind of point, but it isn't the case. It isn't actually factual.
Like 110 million a year in debt service. It's 110 million, adding 2.5 billion to the cost, 2.5 billion. So these are not small, inconsequential decisions that are being made. When you actually divert it to putting it in dollars, my concern.
What he's saying is you didn't come to my office and ask my permission. You didn't seek my blessing. You need to do something that I think is smart.
Is if we push the cost of this project up by $2.5 billion for the in-state line, $2.5 billion, the folks in the rail belt are going to be paying that bill one way or the other, even though we cap it at 16 cents plus 2% escalation. I think that's what's the conversation is roughly what we're looking at. So when we're asked on one hand to give property tax relief, which I think is needed in some form, 20 mils is too high. That's 2% of the value. And there is no property tax on construction right now. It doesn't exist.
Under current law, you do not pay it on construction.
But at the end of that, there'd be the property tax would kick in. So if we give them, say, 150 million in tax relief, yet they cost us another 110, we only have a margin of 40. That doesn't make good business sense to me from a consumer's perspective. So I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know what the total dollars that we're asking are going to end up taking off the table for which would have been collected by property tax.
That's because Senator Stedman has not been part of the conversation and the building of this project. It's not Senator Stedman's project. He's not on the board of directors. He's not been doing the legwork. He's not been working hard to put a project together, to find buyers and sellers of gas and to find contractors to do a project and to find investors. He's not part of that. He's just a senator sitting on the finance committee, happens to be one of the chairs, and he's got an investment background. And so he thinks that he knows best. Like, let's run this entire project by Senator Stedman. And if he blesses off on it and thinks it's wise, then we should go forward. But if he doesn't think it's wise, like, who are you? You're one guy. How many people have looked at this project?
Clearly, like I said, there does need to be 2 mills is way too high, too big of a strain on the cash flow. But you've got this other offset. So if we gave up 110 in property tax collection, and it doesn't go to the state, it goes to the boroughs and all that, right? But I'm just using the aggregate numbers. Yet you go through a financing package that costs you another 110. You haven't moved the needle at all for the ratepayer. So I think that we need to take a look at that. There is significant concerns when the federal loan guarantee opportunity is not exercised, and it's big dollars.
Senator Stedman is just expressing his lack of understanding how this project makes sense from his perspective. That's what he's expressing. He's putting the dots together as best he can because he hasn't been in the room when the project is put together. He hasn't been part of the process. He's received as much information as the rest of the legislature has received. He's had access to the same public information that everybody else has received. He's drawing on his experience and he's saying, oh, well, if I was looking at this project, it doesn't make sense to me. But you're not like, it's not your project. It's not your project. They just want to know whether you will reduce the taxes, and then they're going to be on the hook for the project. Nobody at any point is saying the state, taxpayers, ratepayers are on the hook. Nobody is saying that. Matter of fact, they're saying the exact opposite. Go ahead and put it in statute so that consumers are not going to be on the hook for cost overruns for a more expensive project. We will cover it. How do you get this through?
And it's probably $2 to $2.5 billion.
Senator Stedman, through the chair. So those are all fantastic points that you raise and concerns for anyone that's investing or developing the project. From my perspective, and one of the reasons why we've taken the better part of a year to negotiate this contract, my job is to ensure that my kids and my kids' kids have low cost of energy. And so when I evaluate and negotiate this contract, it doesn't matter to me what the project cost is. It only matters what the price I can receive through this contract as it relates to the alternatives for receiving natural gas in the community. And so that's what I balance. I balance a contract for a price per MCF with a certain inflation factor, what that price looks like over a long period of time, which is 30 years, and how that compares to the other alternatives. Enstar has spent over $4.5 million on analysis, demand studies, worldwide RFPs to bring in the best of the best to meet our customers' needs. And this is the project that we selected because of the potential it has to reduce the cost of energy and how it compares to the other alternatives. So all those points that you're making are 100% legitimate points, but they're for the developer and those on the other side of the negotiating table.
Who have all the
From
risk.
my perspective, I care about cost, ensuring that my customers don't have any cost overruns that they're going to be burdened with, and then the term and the service, so the reliability of that contract, again, as it compares to the other alternatives. And in our review, there are no other options that we can have that will have the potential to reduce the price of energy. The price of energy that we're going to be receiving, if there is no export facility, is 100% going to be a challenge, but so is an imported LNG. So when we review the options, I've been saying it for years, neither of them are good for the state of Alaska, but it's unfortunately the only way we can have reliable energy to our homes and to our businesses in South Central Alaska.
Senator Stedman.
It is not the cost of the project. It is the cost of the is the project financeable? Is it cost effective? Is it the word is escaping me? Can you make it work? The cost of the project is largely irrelevant.
Well, I'm warming up the table this morning, but before I leave town to Energy Council here at the end of this meeting. Is in your contract, is there opportunities to have openers so you can renegotiate in the event that costs actually come in lower and or the cost of the escalating, amount, if it's 2% a year, is what we've been kicking around, whatever it is in that range, is substantially less than inflation or other economic trends that maybe de-link that? Or is this?
We know about what the cost needs to be. The project developer knows what the cost needs to be. It's only Senator Stedman that doesn't know where the cost needs to be, right? Looking at it, you make it backwards, right? Look at it from a backwards perspective. If you're going to export gas, the cost needs to be somewhere where the buyers overseas want to buy it. So then back that cost off. That's what your export cost is going to be. And you just figure out where you're at locally based on all of the different costs associated with getting that sales price to the end consumer. You don't have liquefaction costs. You don't have transportation costs. So you take that out of that somewhere around $9, $10 for long-term contracts to Asia. And that's where you come up with your $5 or $6 range. Okay. $10 transportation and liquefaction and another $5 of that $10. That's your cost that Alaskans are going to pay, somewhere around there. It doesn't get lower. It doesn't get any lower than that. That's it. It might get more expensive than that if there are additional costs in state. Employment costs go up, whatever. Might be more than that. The math works. Like it's just the curmudgeon that doesn't want to see it.
Contract, put your feet in concrete blocks for 30 years with no reopeners.
Senator Stedman, through the chair, I have not executed this contract yet, so everything's fair game at this point. Granted, we have come to, I'd say a majority of terms, but some of those options that you're talking about and some ways to be flexible, this is a 30-year deal. And so we need to ensure that we have flexibility for a variety of different situations because, again, ultimately, it's our customers that are going to be burdened with the cost, and we want to make sure that we have the best contract we can on their behalf.
Senator Stedman.
I'd recommend that you put in reopeners, not to pierce the ceiling, 16 plus 2%, but to pierce the floor and go down. They don't have a project without you. And I would recommend to my rail belt colleagues that they encourage you to have reopeners. So if there ever is an opportunity to move the price of energy down, you can exercise that if it's every 5 years, every 10 years or some form. Because we made the mistake years ago, several decades ago, Mr. Chairman, of not having reopeners on our royalties. And our royalty contracts on the North Slope are out of the 60s, early 70s. And they've been very, very expensive because of no reopeners.
Yeah, Senator Stedman through the chair. So every word matters in this contract, and we are seeking every opportunity, whether it's upfront or along the 30-year term, to find ways to reduce the cost of energy to our customers. I love the ideas, and I'd appreciate if you kept them coming. So we'll take advantage of every idea we can and try to get those in the contract.
Okay. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. And Ms. Sims, I don't know if this is a good place, but I think it's timely on the heels of those conversations of, this project there's a number of essential worries. You have the concern that the project won't happen, and then we'll end up being, on bottled gas addiction, basically. We'll be having to buy it and bring it in, and all the cost. And I would almost say embarrassment that brings, because we are Alaska and we've got a lot of it. So I think we need to avoid that if we can. So there's concern if the project doesn't happen. There's concern if the project does happen that will somehow be open to cost overruns of the project, and we won't be able to contain the cost to the consumer. And I know you don't necessarily have much to do with the total project cost overrun piece of it, but you're right in the middle of trying to assure that you have a reliable supply of gas delivered at the best possible cost. I don't know if it's going to come a little bit later, but I think it's one of the things that the people are most concerned about. They're afraid we're somehow going to give away the farm through tax relief to get a project going, and we're still going to get expensive gas. That there's just a lot of worry that we're not going to get what the Alaska people deserve out of these conversations and agreements that are happening. Can you explain a little bit the mechanism behind how Enstar and the RCA work together, of the deliverable that you have as a provider and that they have as a regulatory group, of how that all works together? And let's just surface that for the folks that are listening.
Yeah, Senator Kaufman, to the chair. So really great and important question, and something that we've been, over this 3.5-year time frame, really trying to balance is, first and foremost, when the customers go to turn on their thermostats, there has to be gas in the pipes to do so. And so we've been struggling with that on a daily basis in the wintertime. The collaboration and coordination that's going on with the cook and the producers and the other utilities is hourly during those really challenging times. And so when we're looking at long-term solutions, we have to first and foremost find a reliable source of the commodity. And that's the challenge that we have in Cook Inlet today, is the firm contracts where we have a producer that's obligated to deliver on a certain day at a certain time, a certain volume, are a thing of the past. There is no Cook Inlet producer that will enter into a long-term firm, and I mean truly firm, contract with Enstar today.
And you can lay that at the feet of the RCA. Short-sightedness over the years. You do not have a capacity to generate natural gas out of Cook Inlet from enough producers who are willing to go drill wells and sign long-term contracts. The government regulated us out of gas in Cook Inlet.
So what are the other options? We've got LNG import, and we've got a pipeline from some other place. If there was a non-Alaskan sitting in the Enstar president's seat, the trigger would have been pulled probably a couple years ago on the LNG import solution. But I'm similar to you. It would be an embarrassment for Alaska to do that. So we're giving this a try. And the solution that was presented to us, as I mentioned to Senator Stedman, is equivalent, and from my perspective, better than the alternative solutions. So when we present that contract to the commission reviews a number of things, or should be reviewing a number of things. First off, what is the reliability factor of the contract? Is this something that our customers can bank on, that when they turn their thermostats on, it's going to produce that energy for it? The second thing is the contemplation of term. Some of the challenges and concerns about fluctuation in project cost or inflation, those things, is that reasonable? Is a 30-year term a reasonable term for Enstar to enter into? And then lastly, the price. Is that price competitive to the alternative options? And so when we present this in front of the commission, we're going to have to make all those arguments and show them why we selected and executed the contract that we did. And they're going to dive into that contract, and they're going to take a look and determine ultimately, is this better than the alternative options? And what are the ramifications? And this is something that is in statute. What are the ramifications if the commission rejects that contract? So that's what the commission is going to be tasked with doing. It is a major, major lift for them. It's going to be a challenge, and equally challenging is our presentation to them to show them that this is the best result for Alaskans. And again, the only project that has the potential to reduce the cost of energy down to $5, which is equivalent to what we were paying back in 2006. So there's a lot of optimism with this project.
So if there's optimism, why take the risk at this point? Why accept the risk of the RCA having a different opinion? Why accept the risk? Why not have the legislature write into the bill that just exempts this project and gas contracts from RCA oversight? The legislature is already speaking to it right now, right? They're already acknowledging that $16 gas is this contract that Enstar is talking about. I mean, they're not reviewing the contract, right? The legislature isn't. That would be a nightmare. But they're acknowledging that there are private sector contracts at play here. Why accept the risk that the RCA would say no, especially if Senator Steadman says, hey, they need you. The project needs you, is what he's saying. You're the customer right now that Glenfarne is going to bank on, that is going to consume the gas. Well, if the RCA says no, then it's scuttling the project. Why would you put that in the hands of the RCA? Just take it out of their jurisdiction for this particular project. It doesn't need to be there. Reduce the risk.
With this contract, because it's getting us to a place back where our economies were thriving. I probably over elaborated there, but I hopefully answered your question.
I'm good.
Thank you, Senator Kaufman. Senator Steadman.
Mr. Chairman, in my enthusiasm, I misspoke a minute ago. I used an erroneous number that a 1% change in cost of debt would be $2.5 billion. It's $3.3 billion. $3.3 billion.
It's like he wasn't even listening. Don't tell me.
Over 30 years.
Tell the financiers and the project developer.
1% over cost of the federal debt, roughly. So I think it's an issue. And I think we need to have dialogue on that issue, Mr. Chairman, at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Steadman. Mr. Sims, please proceed.
Thank you. So diving into just kind of operationally how an LNG facility would operate. And again, this is one of the contracts that we're close to executing. You have about 3.8 BCF per cargo. You can see an example of the number of deliveries that would be required to get to the 38 BCF that we need. On the right, anything in orange shows a gap in storage. So we don't have the storage requirements as we sit today, which is why we're working on that with the commission to hopefully put something in place by 2027.
Just FYI, this line on the map right here is the Spur Highway. This is how I go get my groceries when I go to town to do anything in Kenai. This is the only way for me to go, unless I want to take the long dirt road. That's the escape route in case the plant blows up, the refinery blows up, and we need an alternate way to get out of town or get to town. This is the road that has to be rerouted, and it gets rerouted all the way around back on the backside of this project, but all the way around the project and connects back to the road. That is what we're faced with here in Nikiski. This is state highway right now.
But this is just really kind of a summary slide with a picture there of kind of conceptual where that facility would go as it relates to the LNG property that is currently owned by Glenfarne and Enstar. Diving into the price, which has been talked about recently, if you were to Google, and I did this yesterday, so when I say today it's 18 per MMBTU, you can Google JKM prices and it'll show you, right away what they are today. JKM is the Japan Korean marker. It is, one of the largest trading hubs for LNG. It's hovering around that $18 per MMBTU. The one thing that you can be guaranteed of is that there's going to be volatility. So if you were to look at the JKM forecasts 10 years ago, and look at what the actuals were, it wasn't anything close to what the forecasts were. Shocker, it's a commodity. It's going to bounce up and down and be all over the place. The question is, how high is it going to go as it relates to what the forecast has been? And recently, because of the different conflicts that have been going on and across the world, it's been challenged, as is every commodity price. You have to tack on a $1 per MMBTU shipping cost. And then what a lot of people miss out is, they just focus on what the JKM commodity price is, and they don't consider the infrastructure that's required to actually be able to receive the commodity itself. We don't have that set up in the state of Alaska today. So when you look at that infrastructure that's required, it's about an additional 3 to 5 MMBTU in addition to the commodity price plus the shipping price. So when you're looking at the total all-in cost for LNG imports, assuming that the JKM forecast is correct, you're looking at somewhere from $16 to $22 per MMBTU. Again, when you compare that to what we're currently paying, it's $10.80. So you've got a situation where you have the infrastructure, you have the ability to accept LNG import. The question is, what's the commodity price going to be and how badly is it fluctuating, either up or down?
I'm sure he's going to bring up a slide here that says the Stedman import pricing or the Stedman approved pricing, right? Like that's the nature of the conversation that we're having right now is, well, this has got to make sense to Senate Finance. If it doesn't make sense to Senate Finance, then it doesn't really matter.
Will be the determination of what our prices and what our customers are paying. And from my perspective, I don't like going to the commission and saying, here's our contract, here's what it looks like. And they ask me, what's the price going to be in 2030? I have no idea. And I can't tell either the RCA or my customers what the price of gas is going to be in 4 years, because it's all dependent upon that market and that volatility.
Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. Sims, when you talk about the LNG terminal infrastructure, is that including the additional storage that's shown as needed on your next slide?
Senator Kaufman, through the chair, that is not inclusive of the storage that's required. So you have to take that $16 and $22. This slide is intended to show what the replacement gas cost, the weighted average cost of gas would look like. So we're going from $10.80. You then take that $10.80 and add the $3 per MCF, which is the Enstar charge for distribution of that service. Same thing applies to the JKM costs and the import costs. You have to add that distribution charge that Enstar would be charging.
Senator Kaufman.
But I understand that additional storage is also a component of the LNG import because of the offloading dynamics.
Senator Kaufman, through the chair, that's absolutely correct. And that was the slide earlier. We need additional storage. That will more than likely cost an additional $1 per MCF, in addition to the $3 per MCF that Enstar is currently charging.
Senator Stedman.
That's where I was going.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think their explanation is reassuring on how you pricing your contract. We've been under the assumption since we've been working on this project here the last couple of weeks that Enstar is using the imported LNG as a ceiling, for lack of a better word, to protect the ratepayers. So we understand that and appreciate that. So we're not concerned in that regard. So you have options. So
Senator Stedman, through the chair. So the challenge, as we've been evaluating the different projects that have come before us, from LNG providers from across the world, and there's a big difference and distinction between the two. We know that we can control whether or not an LNG import facility is built. We can't do that with the pipeline. So that's why we have the two contracts. And from a commercial eloquence perspective, the flexibility to bounce from an LNG import facility to the pipeline if it's built, again, for the potential of receiving low-cost natural gas, that's really the unique aspect that this contract brings to the table. If I'm entering into a contract with some other entity for just LNG import, I'm going to be entering into a 20 or 30-year agreement with them with no flexibility to bounce over to the AKLNG pipeline when it's built. And so that to me was, sort of minimizing regret cost as much as possible. I'm forecasting the need for LNG import, but if that pipeline's built, gosh, I would really be, punching myself if that pipeline was built and here I am importing LNG and watching.
Yeah, we'd be punching you.
So that's why I really like the construct that we have set up with Glenfarne, because it allows us to take advantage of that pipeline when it's built.
Senator Stedman?
No, I just wanted to mention that because we've been working on this for several weeks and working under that assumption.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. You're a scholar and a gentleman.
Please proceed, Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So hopping into the AKLNG pipeline and again, the delivery profiles, similar chart as we showed for the LNG import scenario. There's still the need for additional storage. And the pipeline, everybody's seen the pipeline map, so they know where it's coming from. Hopping into pricing for the AKLNG pipeline, as it sits, the fixed price at $16 per MMBTU, not subject to cost overruns, but it is subject to an annual inflation factor. We're still in negotiations, as I've mentioned, so nothing here is set in stone. As volumes on the pipeline increase, the price to consumers decreases. And again, this is the only project that has the potential to reduce the price of energy. I talked a lot about earlier the flexibility from a commercial perspective of bouncing from the LNG import facility over to the pipeline. And this third bullet really touches to that, is as contemplated in the agreement, in the framework agreement, when the pipeline is built, after a certain transition period, the AKLNG project will buy the assets of the LNG import project. And why that's important is they're currently two independent projects. And if that wasn't set up that way, we would still have to pay for the LNG infrastructure, even though we're not bringing in LNG import. So that's the principle behind this, is the AKLNG project will procure the LNG import infrastructure and assets that have already been built that will remove the cost obligation from the ratepayers, and then we can transition over to the LNG pipeline. So from my perspective, it's a win-win for the consumer. Again, addressing the reliability aspect, we're building the LNG import terminal, so we'll know we'll have gas for our customers. And if that pipeline project comes down, it'll procure or buy the assets that then resolve that issue. So again, really optimistic about this and just wanted to make sure you guys had that information. And I think that was my last slide. So happy to address any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the critical factors that we're struggling with here is just volume.
Really quickly here, Dean asks a question, why hasn't Stedman asked what kind of profit Enstar is making with a $3 add-on? And I'm not sure that Stedman has been asking questions about profit with Glenfarne, but others have. Maybe perhaps the answer to this question is that with respect to anything that Enstar is selling in this state to consumers, it goes through the RCA, and we already know what their profit margin, what their profit allowance, I guess, is what you would, I'm not sure what the technical term is, but we already know what the profit allowed for Enstar's actions as a utility and as a monopoly in the state of Alaska. So I think that's probably why they're not grilling them on this. With regard to Glenfarne, there is no knowledge. There's no historical knowledge on what profit they've been able to acquire or factor into their projects in other jurisdictions or other places where they've been and what their profit would be here, right? Again, it's kind of like the question is, in my opinion, it's a moot point, just like the conversation with the cost of the project is. I'm the guy who wants gas. I want somebody else to build a pipeline. I'm not going to be able to do it. So do I care if I get the pipeline and I get gas and it's at a price that's reasonable to me? Do I care how much it costs and how much you can profit by managing the inputs? Do I care? I've got the price. I've got the gas. I didn't have to build it. I'm like, Why do I have to second guess how well you can do it? I only want the pipeline and a sure supply of gas and at a price I want, and I don't want you to profit too much. Like, why do I care? Good on you. If you can meet my needs and provide gas and provide a source of revenue, and you're able to profit from it. Oh, I get it. I understand. It's that revenue piece. If you profit too much, then we're going to take more of it in taxes. I get it. I understand. It's not fair. It's not fair that the government doesn't get, that you get more than the government. It's the people's resource, and we need to have our fair share. I get it. I understand. That's why. That's why.
The size and scope of the gas line at 18 billion with that 20% contingency added in the mid value, and 80% debt or whatever they're going to look at doing. But then when we look at how much gas the rail belt consumes, you're right under 200 million cubic feet a day, I think. Is that correct? And those economics, they're not close. They just don't work. So there's got to be more gas buyers at the end. And when you look at your business model and look around the rail belt, what do you see as potential expansions for, your utility to sell more gas that are reasonably deliverable?
Senator Steadman through the chair. So that point that you're making goes back to my comment about how we can't control whether or not a pipeline is built, because we see the same thing. The volumes for the utilities in South Central, that they challenge the economics of a multi-billion-dollar project. So that's why we're focusing on the LNG import first, along with the pipeline, to support those efforts. As far as what additional demand do I see, I think we can get up to 500 million a day pretty quickly. That's 182.5 BCF of gas on an annual basis. When you look at the opportunity from Donlin, who is aggressively updating their cost estimates today, that's a significant volume that would be attributed to the pipeline. When you look at the potential for the Nutrien facility to come back online, they're a significant load, I believe twice the size of Enstar when they were fully operating. The potential for some exports back in February, which I'm hopefully you all have heard, the military sent out a request for interest for developers to put data farms at J-Bear, at Clear, and at Eielson. Because of the interest, they moved that to an RFP, and those RFPs are due, or were due, I believe, May 30th. So a data farm on any one of those bases significantly can impact the volumes to that pipeline, depending on how large it is. I've looked through all the RFP documents. I haven't actually seen what it is. I believe it's dependent on the project that the developer is proposing. But a data farm volume on base is a significant increase in volume. So as far as getting to the 500 million a day, I don't think there's going to be much challenge if we have access to reliable gas coming from the North Slope.
Yeah.
Senator Steadman.
I think Donlin Creek's 30. So that's
Now he's going to second guess Sims. He's like, no, I'm going to do my own math, my own thinking. I asked you, I don't like your answer. I'm going to do my own math.
A little over 200, 220. That seems to be pretty likely. We've had presentations on that, with or without this gas line. The data farms definitely have some interest in big loads. Agrium needs low-cost gas and $1 billion investment. So I'm not so sure about if I'd bet the farm on that one. But I thought it'd be interesting just to see your perspective.
Yeah. Senator Steadman through the chair, just to elaborate a little bit more. So just speaking specifically for Enstar, when you look at our growth, it's not going to get us, up to the 500 million by itself. It definitely is going to take some large industrial customers to come online. We grow at about 1% a year from a customer perspective. Now, I have been asked as recent as late last year whether or not I had 30 BCF for a data farm in the Northern Division. Obviously, I don't, but they were looking at developing something large in the Matsu. So there's definite interest out there, and we keep getting calls. And unfortunately, we're having to turn some customers away because we don't have the volumes for them.
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pretty sure to get to FID, you have to have signed contracts, take or pay contracts. I'm not so sure we're very close to those for phase 2. That'll be
Again,
something else we need to have dialogue about when we get to.
Why does Stedman need to know this information? Like, it's not his project. You're absolutely right. All of that's got to be there. They can't get to that point until you answer the tax question. So why don't we get there? Get to the tax question. It's the only thing that you have to do right now is just figure out what your tax regime is going to be. All of this other stuff is not necessary. It's not necessary.
Phase 2.
Senator Stedman, through the chair, I can't speak to who may or may not be signing a contract soon, but I can just speak to our experiences and our current negotiations, and things are going well.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is if we have this large volume potentially coming down in the future, the pipe is coming closer and closer and it's done deal. I'm afraid we're disincentivizing production of what we have in Cook Inlet. Because the economic case for it, if it's about to be displaced, that will create more of a potential gap in local production and end up where we're trying to unstrand one resource, we're then suddenly stranding another that is still potentially viable. And I mean, there's everything from jobs, out in the inlet to local production. It's part of the economic fabric of what we're doing. It's also part of our constitutional mandate to develop and produce for best use. And one of the conversations that I want to have as we continue on this is how are we looking at that big picture? And it enters into the arena that you're in right now, because if you have a contract that has no room to take gas that may arguably be cheaper, I mean, who knows? If there's no trap door there so that you could buy, if somebody can produce below that $16 plus inflation number, they can come at $15.50 or whatever, if there's room there. I just hope what we're doing isn't structured so that it's almost just disincentivizing us to continue to produce and develop what we could otherwise be doing, with the eye that it's futile. This thing's coming and we're buying gas, and then we're just abandoning an otherwise valuable and important asset for Alaskans. So I hope that's part of the puzzle. I want to have a conversation. I don't know if it's with DNR or whoever who's looking at that big picture, because the AOGCC, they're looking at it with the blinders of they're looking at pool.
Okay, this has nothing to do with the tax rate on this project. Okay, but the larger point is one of economics. The only reason we could be talking about North Slope natural gas to South Central Alaska is because the economics support selling that gas to Asia, to other customers. That's the only reason we're actually having a conversation about this. So for Cook Inlet, you want to keep it viable, you got to have buyers. It's got to be economic or economical, right? So if the cost to produce Cook Inlet gas, we've heard that it's so expensive to produce it in Cook Inlet, and it's so much cheaper to produce it on the North Slope. But you can't get it from the North Slope to South Central Alaska without more customers. Well, the same thing would be possible with Cook Inlet gas, right? With more customers, is it going to be economical? If you can charge the right price to make it economical, it'll be economical and it'll continue. But if the cost to the consumers is going to be greater than the alternative, like North Slope gas, then it's not economical anymore. We were just having a conversation with Sims a couple of years ago. This is before Glenfarne comes on the picture, right? And the conversation is Cook Inlet gas is not economical. They aren't going to go after more of it, and we need more of it, so we're going to have to import. And import's going to be expensive, but at least we can guarantee the supply is going to come in because it's economical. We got enough customers here. The price is going to be right. We'll be able to have the supply. Well, that's the same thing that Cook Inlet needs. The right price and the consumers to buy it. It's the price piece that we don't want to accept. In order for the producer to go find it out there, the price needs to be higher. It needs to be at a point where we don't want to pay it, which means it's not economical. Just like the pipeline would not be economical if it was just us buying it, us buying the gas. There has to be another customer base out there buying it, and that's Asia. So it is 100% subsidizing our ability to get gas because we've got this subsidy is the wrong word to use, but the buyers, the large number of buyers in Asia is what's giving us the ability to call this project borderline economical, right? Again, none of that has anything to do with what is the right tax regime that is sitting in this bill before them, right? This is all, I'd hate to call it theater, but it's all misappropriation of authority in the legislature, right? Just answer the dang question about the right tax policy. Just answer that and move on. You can go have a beer and have a conversation with Senator Stedman on pontificating all of the ways that this project isn't going to work and isn't going to be wise. Set the tax policy and we'll see. If the project doesn't get built because it's not economical, there will be no harm done in changing the tax policy because there will be no project to tax. Like, there's nothing to lose by just setting the tax policy at the rate that is necessary to make the project go forward. And if it goes forward and you're receiving revenue through a volumetric tax, then it's a win-win because you wouldn't have had it otherwise. Like, just answer the dang question.
But who's looking at all of Alaska in this sense as pertains to this project and the economic displacement or loss of value that could be created as we do this?
Yeah, Senator Coffin through the chair. So that's it is a challenge. And, I think you would hear from Cook and the producers, what do you expect me to do with all this talk about a pipeline coming down from the North Slope, imported LNG, LNG? Am I supposed to be continuing to invest? I think, from Enstar's perspective, our number one priority from a resource perspective is the Cook Inlet. When you look at how our system is designed, it wraps around the Cook Inlet because that's where we've been buying gas for 60 years. We want to continue to do that. But the market is telling us today that it can't be reliable. And so we have to find another resource besides the Cook Inlet because it is not reliable. Hillcorp is drilling 27 wells this year. That's their projection. And that is to meet existing contractual obligations. So again, going back to the balance sheet question, there's no other producer in the Cook Inlet that has the balance sheet to do 27 wells a year to meet the needs of the consumer. So there's some of me, a part of me that feels badly for the Cook Inlet producers and the fact that their business line may be ending, but it's my obligation to make sure that I have gas for customers. And today it is not forecasted to come out of the Cook Inlet. So there's businesses that are growing. There's businesses that are failing. And I think we really need to look at why they're failing. I don't know that I can say much more than that about it. Ultimately, it's up to DNR to manage those resources. But if there's gas available on a firm basis from Cook Inlet producers, we will buy it.
Senator Kaufman.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's a difficult situation. I just hope if there's a way we can navigate through it as elegantly as possible.
I'm going to jump forward here to
right now. You
conversation about 19 minutes ahead. And then this is going to wrap us up for the night here. Almost there. Okay.
There would be more volume going through the spur line, right, to bring that tariff down. And then how much?
So we're
can
talking
we
about the
compress
Fairbanks
that
spur line.
price down from the 23 cents.
Senator Stedman, through the chair, if I were king for a day, how I would structure that if I were the Fairbanks community, we have infrastructure in place today. One of the reasons why they struggled so much in the interior was they didn't have what's called economy energy sales, where the South Central utilities produce energy and send it up the intertie. So to your point about the high cost of the in-state pipeline to Fairbanks with a spur, if I were a member of the Fairbanks community, what I would do once a pipeline is built is I would have it sent up the intertie. So have the local electrics in South Central send it up the existing infrastructure on the intertie until the AKLNG project is exporting. Then build the spur line over. Then you have access to the $5 gas and reduced cost, and that is really a benefit to the community. But to the point about additional volumes and the spur line, don't do that until you have the low-cost commodity. Take advantage of the existing infrastructure. That's going to save ratepayers money and reduce cost and be a benefit to the entire rail belt.
Mr. Stedman.
This is a follow-up on the tariff, because there's cost of rolling in the tariff for the spur line of the Fairbanks into the whole aggregate line. And that would have to be blessed by RCA. Is that, in your opinion, or do you even want to venture opinion, likely or unlikely for RCA to allow that tariff for the spur line to be rolled into the rates of the entire gas line or not?
Senator Stedman, through the chair. So if it's in statute, that they're going to have to find a way to make it happen. I looked at the language a while ago, so I'm not up to speed on what it currently states, but I believe it was something along the lines of a reasonable sharing between the interior and the South Central users of pipeline gas. It would be up to the commission to determine what that reasonable sharing is or looks like. But if it's in statute, ultimately, they're bound by that, and they would have to come up with some kind of a solution.
Senator Stedman.
I think I'm not going to be able to attend the meeting this afternoon. I've got other meetings I got to go to out of state, but I would like that question by one of my colleagues here to be asked directly to RCA this afternoon, because I think it's a significant issue. So there's no misunderstanding as we go forward on how that spur line would be paid for. In other words, there's no potential disappointment, because we want to have gas to Fairbanks for not only the economic issues, but the air emission issues that they're faced with and the military bases.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. Senator Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Senator Stedman bringing up the spur line. Obviously, in my mind, this big picture, this gas line is for Alaska. Oil brings us revenue, right? Oil was never going to lower our energy costs because we just sell it. We don't refine enough to make, where we just sell it at a low price. But this is that, right? And I agree, the spur line is important. But I mean, we talk about paying for the spur line, yet we're going to spend $18 billion to have gas right to South Central Alaska at per se no cost to the ratepayer. It's just coming. It's going to be paid for. So however, we have to figure out how to do this, but there's got to be a bigger picture here. It's like my picture is, okay, are we going to bring this down to South Central? That's going to, it's going to suffice. It's going to take care of things. And we build a spur line to Fairbanks, but it's the after projects that could happen for the rest of rural Alaska that if you can connect or bring natural gas, even if it's just for generating electricity in some of our communities, to lower those costs, this is a win-win for everybody. So I just think we have to have a bigger picture. And, and I think it's up to Fairbanks to whether, if they build a spur line, whether to have any tax on that line. I think we need to make sure that Fairbanks has the opportunity to not have any tariffs or any taxes on their section of line. So the ratepayers do get the lowest, rate to be paid for. So that's just my opinion. But also, there's one thing I really am pretty adamant about, that the legislation cannot be dictating what prices can be set. That is between the producers and the buyers. I don't think the legislature should be sitting and making any decisions on, hey, we're going to set a rate. This is all you can pay, because like you said, the markets fluctuate, and that is, totally out of most of our wheelhouses to determine those kind of things.
Senator Crock, through the chair, if I could just opine a little bit on that. So, I think, and I've said this privately to folks when I get a little bit of pushback on it, but the pipe, as a pipeline utility, if the large pipeline comes down from the North Slope, the lateral or the spur line to Fairbanks is a easy problem. That will happen because there is potential demand in that area that will push for that pipeline to happen. Now, the cost, that definitely needs to be worked out, but a pipeline, a lateral of that size, that diameter is a very easy job that we would happily do. So I think that's going to happen regardless of whether or not there's legislation or not, if the AKLNG project happens. Now, speaking to the principle of the legislature, price caps or, kind of hopping into commercial terms, I think what's really important for folks, and we've had this challenge down at the RCA as well, where they kind of cherry pick terms that they like or don't like. A contract negotiation is a process in which you give and take, and you don't just give or take on price. You give or take on a lot of operational, on terms, on opt-outs, as Senator Stedman was mentioning, and all those things impact the overall cost to customer. So we have a tendency to just look at price. What's the price? What's the price? What's the price? But there are so many different components of a contract that make up the total cost. So to your point, principally, I agree 100%. It can actually hinder negotiation and progress by setting something like that in there, especially when we already have the mechanisms in place to ensure that there are protections for customers. We are self-interested in ensuring that we have the lowest price possible. A lot of people don't believe this, but there are competitors to natural gas in South Central, whether it's fuel oil or electricity. So all of those things, if our price is too high, could be replaced by other sources of energy. And so just it's really important. And then you have the commission, of course, that comes in and determines ultimately what gets charged to customers. But
it's amazing what happens when you believe in the market, when you believe in a market economy. Like the legislature is like, we want to protect. We want government to come in and solve our problem and make sure that we don't have risk and our prices are low, and we trust government to do it for us. Like, government is the problem. Get out of the way and let the market forces produce this for us. Just, oh man. Anyway, let's wrap this up.
But the sole focus on price from a legislative perspective can be very dangerous, because there are multiple components of negotiations, and all of them ultimately drive the cost that results to consumers.
That was another point that I wanted to highlight here. Sims has given a little 101 on contracts. It's not even a 101. It's like remedial, the highlights from a remedial class on contracts. Nobody understands how to write a contract. Nobody in the legislature does this on a regular basis. Very, very few would, right? And yet they're in a position here where they have to second guess everything. They don't know what it takes. Sims is like, you can't just focus on the price, but that's exactly what the legislature's doing. That's what they put in the statute. Or you can't have this, can't charge any more than this. And they have no idea what the ramifications are of putting that in the contract. What does it do to the process of negotiating a contract? They have no idea. No idea. let me put this even in more succinct terms. The legislature has a responsibility to review contracts that get signed by collective bargaining units for the state government. And they fail to do so every time for 6 years. It's an afterthought in the appropriations process. The budget document acknowledges that the contract has been signed before the legislature, and it just kind of just agrees to it, and nobody in the legislature scrutinizes it. We don't even ask. We don't care. But all of a sudden, we've got two private companies that are trying to put a project together, and they've got a contract, and now the legislature cares about the contract. It's like, it's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. The hypocrisy that exists in the legislature is just mind-boggling. Anyway, I think we're about done here.
But if you look at the alternatives that you mentioned, electricity or diesel, homeowners aren't, in many instances, have the finances to convert, which is a reality.
Mr. Chair, you are 100% correct. And we actually, in the very early stages of this, looked at what the cost would be for a natural gas customer in Enstar service territory to convert over to electricity. So, for example, let's do Susitna-Wintana and provide low-cost energy, electricity for folks so that they could heat with electricity. That cost was over $75,000 for one single-family home to convert over. The realistic situation is that, homeowners don't have that kind of dollar to be able to convert their homes over to electricity. So that is a very valid point.
Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. Talking about the Fairbanks situation with energy costs reminded me of the phrase that the future is already here. It's just not well distributed. And I think Fairbanks is serving as a spark plug for the engine of the pipeline proposal, because they've already experienced the tremendous costs. So they're doing a good job of helping us to remember what might be in store if we don't make the right decisions on energy availability. The question that I had for you is a little bit in the weeds, different than what we've had. And I guess, how closely have you been able to look at what your actual tie-in? So assuming the pipeline gets built and it's down
Okay, too much in the weeds. We're not going to go there. All right, question. Frank asks, can one legislature bind a future legislature? And the answer is no, you cannot. Only the Constitution can bind the legislature. So whatever it is that you want to do, you got to get it done in the Constitution. And this is the reason why. Well, that's not the reason why. There is a reason why you can only amend the Constitution in two ways: through a constitutional convention that's either called by the legislature or by the people every 10 years, or the legislature can propose a constitutional amendment to curtail itself. Okay, those are the only two ways to get an amendment to the Constitution. You can draft all the good ideas that you want. You can talk about all the good ideas that you want, but if you don't have 2/3 majority in the body and a voting, I should also say that the voting public gets to vote on a constitutional amendment. So that is another vote that has to happen. But you got to have 2/3 of the body to pass it out of the legislature. So that's a pretty high bar to change the Constitution. That's the only way you're binding a future legislature. Otherwise, they get to change the law every session, whatever it is. They get to undo or redo spending decisions every session. The legislature does enter contracts, Frank. The Legislative Budget and Audit Committee that I chaired entered into a contract with Gaffney Klein for a sum of money. We draft up a contract. I had lawyers draft up a contract, hand it over to the company that bid on the request for proposal, and we signed a contract. And now we had a consultant for Gaffney Klein. I mean, it's the legislature can just like any of the departments can enter into contracts with people with the authority that they have and the money they've been appropriated and allocated for a purpose like that. Thanks for joining us, Rick. And Rick says good night. So goodbye, Rick. All right. That's going to wrap it up for the show tonight. We're getting close. I think the frustration, at least my frustration with what's happening, in just about every meeting, somebody here hit it on the nail on the head. Every meeting we seem to be going down this rabbit hole of things that don't pertain to an actual tax conversation, right? It's almost like we're trying to run out the clock on the session. Wonder if that has anything to do with it. Bunch of bills got passed. The governor's drop dead date is for signing the bills or vetoing them is the day before the end of the session, special session. So I wonder if drawing this out and getting to that past that point so that he has to make a decision as to whether to veto something or not has anything to do with whether they pass his gas line bill or not. I just thinking out loud here as to whether that has something to do with it. Could it be that something other than the gas line tax policy could be at play with the special session? Could it be anything else other than gas line tax policy? Anyway, I'm being sarcastic. Of course there is. All right. Y'all have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow night. Lord willing, creek don't rise. And we will we'll re-engage. Adios.